Welcome to our JavaScript web course. In this video, we will look at some jQuery effect methods. I will start out with the toggle method. And here I am showing three parts of the code. I have the browser, the web view, I have the inspector, and I have the actual code itself. So I am clicking on an A element, and I am manipulating the element underneath it, which is a paragraph. They both have ID attributes. So our jQuery code would be the selector.click, because I'm clicking on the link, and then the statement, the selector, which is the object that's being manipulated, .toggle. That's the method. And we are passing it a 2-second time duration. In order to really see an effect, it is a good idea to exaggerate the time duration and then change it to what you would typically use. So this is the toggle method or effect method. I encourage you to use your inspector so that you can see what is happening. The page has loaded and I have not clicked on anything yet. Notice we have an event tied into our A element. I am going to click the link. I would like you to watch what happens inside the P element, because that will give you some insight into what jQuery is actually doing. So now I will click, and look what's happening. It happened very quickly. It set a lot of styles. Take a look at the website. The paragraph is no longer there. Take a look at the HTML. Style equals display : none. What jQuery is doing here, it is coding in inline styles. We are manipulating the display property back and forth. All of these effect methods do that. This CSS display property is used an awful lot in jQuery and JavaScript applications, and we have used it in our traditional JavaScript applications. I would like to point out that an inline style takes precedence over any other type of style in the event of a conflict. So regardless of whether there are class styles applied, descendant styles applied, that have to do with display, this will take precedence. This is the jQuery framework here. I just typed in the URL in my browser. And it is nothing but a library of all of these methods, and it defines how they work. So now I'm going to click, and we will see the paragraph on the page. So please watch what's happening inside this P element here. So I click and notice it's changing some properties. Now notice the paragraph is back on the page. However, the style attribute remains inside the P element, although it has no value. That's just the way jQuery works. Okay, so I click, and I click again. All right, notice that not only is it manipulating the display property, it's also manipulating the height. It's also manipulating the opacity. So as it hides and shows the content. Ultimately, we're left with the display property. However, it's also along the way manipulating other CSS properties. Now let's look at the slide toggle method. My web page layout and coding is identical, and my jQuery is identical, except we're using another method. Again, I am using a 2-second duration here. So if you look in the Inspector tab here, we see that we have an event attached to the A. There is our P element. It does not have a style attribute. I will click the link, and because the information is visible, it will slide up. And notice what happens inside the P element. Here we see similar styles being used. However, the opacity property is not being used. We see the height being manipulated, and ultimately display is removed. Slide toggle and toggle look almost identical in the web page. However, slide toggle has a smoother effect, more of a motion. Now let's look at fade toggle. Again, the HTML and jQuery is identical, except that we are using a different method, the fade toggle method, and we are using a 2-second duration. If we look in the Inspector tab, we see we have an event attached to our A element. Our P element does not have a style attribute. When I click, it will fade out, and when I click again, it will fade in. So I click and watch what happens in the P element. Ultimately, we wind up with display equals none. I'm going to click and it will fade back in. In this method, we are purely manipulating the opacity. The values from opacity range from 0 to 1, and they are usually incremented in decimals. So that is how jQuery is fading this in and out. It's manipulating the opacity property over time, and then ultimately it sets the display to none. So these are very nice methods, very easy to use, and very popular in many web applications.